Hey there, it's Ben Housel here, and in this tutorial review we're going to be doing a review of Digital Product 669's Ultimate Story Pack. Now if you're posting things to Facebook, to Instagram, and you need to create stories, transitions, titles and effects, then the Ultimate Story Pack has you covered. So we're going to be doing a review of that, but we're also going to be looking at how we set up our Final Cut Pro 10 project to post to Instagram as well. So there's some resolution considerations to make when you're setting up your projects and editing your video, and then also when you're exporting out your files to upload them to Instagram. So if you're interested in tips and tricks for Final Cut Pro 10 and also reviews for different plugins and products for Final Cut Pro 10, then please do hit the subscribe button and the notifications button. I'm always trying to make my tutorials practical as well as including some reviews like in this particular video. But yeah, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications button. Otherwise, let's dive in and have a look at how we get our video edits into Instagram using the Ultimate Story Pack. So basically, the first thing we need to do is set up our timeline, our project timeline, so it's the right resolution. So we're going to come up to our File menu here and go to New and Project. And we can also hit the New Project button in the middle here as well. And we'll call this Ultimate Story Pack Demo. We're going to drop this into our existing images event. And this is where we're really going to change things up here. So we're going to change our 1080p HD resolution to a custom resolution. And basically we're flipping the camera. So we're going from a landscape 1920 by 1080 to a portrait 1080 by 1920. So the resolution is the same, just flipped. And we'll also stick to 29.97. And the main reason I'm doing that is because that is the frame rate that my video footage that I'm normally using is shot at. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second or 25 frames per second, if you're in the UK or Japan for PAL frame rate, then you might want to change it to that. But we're going to set our frame rate to 29.97. And we will also leave these settings as they are for the moment. So we'll click OK. And what you'll notice now is that my video in the middle here, rather than being landscape, is a portrait video. So if we click on my project timeline up here on the top left, then we can see the resolution. We can just double check everything. And what you'll notice is when we come into our generators, which is where we'll find our Ultimate Story Pack Instagram templates, is we have all of these different portrait setups here. So at a basic level, we have some basic animated backgrounds that we can use. And we can see a few of these. And we can mix these with some of the titles that are available to us as well. So we have some animated titles. Now, one thing with the Ultimate Story Pack and with some of the other plugins from Digital Studio 669 is that you need to make sure you download the fonts. They kind of make the story pack. So if you've downloaded the Ultimate Story Pack and your fonts don't look like they fit the layout as well as they do here, then what you'll want to do is jump to the information you got when you bought and downloaded the Ultimate Story Pack and have a look at the README. And if you follow the README document down, you'll find on the second page we have a list of all the different fonts that are used in the Ultimate Story Pack. And if you want to, you can kind of go to each site and download them individually, but they've also been gathered together to be downloaded from a Dropbox file, so you can download them all in one go. And I believe there's around 70 or 80 fonts to install, but that will mean that once you've installed them and started up Final Cut Pro, then you will get the fonts looking like they should in each of the generators. So you can see we've got these generators preceded with IG. These are the Ultimate Story Pack generators, and we're going to jump in and have a look at the pre-made scenes. So basically, I want to look at a couple of kind of key things that are important when you're working with any generators in Final Cut Pro that will be useful to you. So basically, if we grab this special offer generator and drag it down to the timeline, you'll see that when we hover over it now, it fits the resolution of our project perfectly. So we've got a few different options here for modifying this particular pre-made scene. So if we select it on the timeline and come up to our inspector on the top right, if you don't see your inspector, then just go to Window, Show in Workspace, and make sure you've got the inspector checked. And that will bring up our options here. And the inspector is divided into a few key different areas here. So we have our title generators options on the left hand side. We have our regular type options here, which is where we can kind of modify fonts and some colors and stuff like that. There's a little bit of crossover between both of these options. So I would tend to try and change as many options as I could in the Ultimate Story Pack's generator options, which is this first T. And then we also have some motion properties, the regular motion properties and that type of thing that we get with Final Cut Pro, as well as color correction and that type of thing. So most of the changes we'll make will be in here. So we can do things like changing the different colors that we have here. So we can flip them to the color that we want. And we can also, when we come into this color box, type in RGB values if we have those for our particular organizations or corporate colors that we're using. So to get this box up, there's a couple of different places we click in the color boxes over here. So if we click on the box, it will bring up our colors panel, which is part of the Mac OS X operating system, and we can jump between these different options for using the color wheel picker, which is handy if you want to kind of see which are your complementary colors for different things. And then we can also as well come to our RGB sliders. You can see we've got some options for CMYK and stuff like that here, which we don't need the screen, but in our RGB sliders we can type in these red, green and blue values here, which is the 3 values you'll have when you're using swatches for the screen. So you'll want to grab those. And we can also, if we have a yellow that we want to reuse here or a color that we want to reuse, we can drag that down and save it as well. So we can save colors that we want to use and reuse as we're working in Final Cut Pro and across other different applications as well. So as we scroll down here, you can see we've got the options for our different text holders. So for our first text holder, we have the word special offer in there. If we just highlight this, we can type in something different. And we can scroll down and modify each of the different text boxes independently. And sometimes you might find that you type in text that's bigger than the space that's been made for it, and that's where we have these scale options underneath the text box. And this is the same for lots of the different features in the Ultimate Story Pack. We'll have these kind of similar options for each of the text boxes. And we also have X and Y offset as well, so if we need to modify where that text drops, then we can do that too. So we have all of our colors up at the top, so you can see we've got text 1, text 2, which should be these first 2 lines, and text 3 lines as well. So if we click here, we can change this color, and so they kind of match up, although they're in different spots on there as well. We also have some options to turn the animation on and off as well. So if we don't want any animation for our text, then we can turn that on and off for the animation in and out. And we can also disable some of the text boxes as well, and that would make more room for the product down here. So if we scroll down, you'll notice that we've got some transparency on this backpack here, and this is one of the main things I wanted to look at for this drop zone. So at the moment we've got no source there, but if we come back to our Final Cut Pro project here, we've got a nice pair of shoes that we can select our generator on the timeline, scroll down, and then we can drag across this to our generator. Now you'll notice in here it's kind of coming kind of big, so we can scale that down and we can control the kind of position of it, but we don't have the transparency that we had before with the backpack. So if we want that transparency, we can go into Photoshop and cut things out and save out a PNG, but we can also do this straight away in Final Cut Pro. So the way that we do this is we drop our shoes down to the timeline, and we're going to come across to our effects on the right hand side. If you don't see your effects, just click the effects button, second button from the right over here, and we're going to use the draw mask tool. So if you come to your video and audio effects, scroll all the way down to masks, we're going to grab the draw mask and drop this on. So basically with the draw mask, we're kind of doing a dot to dot drawing around these sneakers. So I've zoomed in to 200% here, and now we can kind of go around this, and depending on your image you may be able to use different ways of keying out or masking things to make the transparency. I can use this little red box to move around, but basically once we've made the transparency here, we can pull that into the drop zone. So I'll just kind of keep going roughly around here. And as long as we keep this on the timeline, we can make changes to it later on as well. So I'm just clicking and holding to drag out the curve at the bottom there. So away we go round. We'll keep coming round. Now one thing to remember is that this is going to be super small on the cell phone kind of screen. So we want this to be good, but we're not printing it out. We're kind of showing it on a Instagram story. So you can make a judgment of how much time you spend on that. Oh, and if we make a mistake with any of these points, we can come back and drag them into the right spot. So it's one of the nice things about this draw mask tool is that we can kind of keep going round and modifying or adding points. If we miss a point here, we can hold down the Alt or Option key, and that will allow us to add a point in there that we can then drop down into position. So we're just gradually coming round, and once we get back to the beginning, we will have masked this out. So if you prefer doing this in Photoshop, I'm probably 50-50 on this, depending on whether you feel like you need to have a perfect mask. Photoshop will definitely have some extra tools for kind of refining the mask as well and kind of improving it. But you can see once we get back around to that first point, we go to fit, then we have our shoes nicely cut out, and we can come back to our generator for the Ultimate Story Pack, scroll down. If we click once on here, instead of dropping something into the source Dropbox here, we can actually scroll along and select that option from the timeline. So basically now we can scale this up. We have the transparency there, we can modify the offset so we get the kind of reflection there nicely, and you can see quite quickly we get a pretty good cutout there. So that's a nice thing to know. You don't necessarily need to round trip to Photoshop to cut things out, depending on how complex the cutting out needs to be. If there's hair in there, for instance, that might be a bit trickier, but we can do this quick kind of cutout of some trainers for our Instagram story in here. Now, once I deleted this, I'm not going to be able to actually get back to this cutout. It's kind of just stored in the story itself. So make sure you've got it right before you delete it. So this is a kind of cool one. We've modified a couple of the colors. We've modified the background we've removed the background from the trainers in Final Cut Pro 10 without going to Photoshop. And then we've modified the kind of scale of different parts of our image and text and offset things so they're laid out nicely for our story. So we'll have a look at another one of these Instagram generators now. So if we come back here, we're going to come back into another one of the Ultimate Story Pack pre-made scenes, and we're going to come to this revolving pizza. So again, we have this kind of nice little animation of a pizza going round, and we're going to replace this item with a plate of something different. So basically, if we come back to our options here, we've got some chicken and beans, and if we select our story here, scroll all the way down, we can click in our drop zone, and if we hover over this image in our library, then we can select it. It's a still image, so it doesn't really matter where we select, and you'll see now we've got the kind of plate cut out, and we need to click then apply clip, and then we can come in here and make a few modifications. So we can modify the positioning of that, and if you want to refine the positioning, we can also use the up and down cursors in here too, and we can increase the scale of it until we lose that kind of darker border. We just have that kind of nice white of the revolving plate. So you can see now we have here that pre-made animation, and then our product or our meal that we would be modifying. And then obviously we are not selling mushroom pizza anymore, so we don't need pizza in the background. Maybe we'd type in some other words, so we'll type in fresh there, order now is fine, and we will scroll up, and this is going to be our signature chicken our signature chicken curry, for instance. So we have a couple of nice little options there for different things too. And now we're going to have a look at one more of the story packs too. So what you'll notice about these story packs is they're exactly 15 seconds long, which is the duration of an Instagram story. So if you edit together a timeline of these, then once they actually upload to Instagram, they'll split into different parts of that story. So we're going to come back again to our generators, and we're going to jump into this "The Wild is Calling and I Must Go" animation. And you can see actually in the kind of preview, it's bursting out of the edge there, but when we drop it onto the timeline, again, it kind of crops nicely into our window here. So we have an image we're going to use for this one. We'll scroll down, come back to our library here, and once we've scrolled down, we'll click on the drop zone. And I find this a little bit easier to do, to select the image, and we'll select this image, the surfer, kind of sunset or sunrise. And you can see here again, it's that offset that's going to make this work. So we need to maybe increase the size of this a little bit, and then work on the X and Y offset so that we can actually see the surfer up at the top there. So we'll just increase this a little bit more, offset that a little more, and now we've got a kind of nice story coming together. And I think one of the things that's really going to work here is playing around with the color. So we have the color filters for our photograph in the background, so we can kind of play with those. So we'll pick a darker blue, and I like that, but I'm going to select a kind of nice beachy green for the background as well. Contrasts nicely with that yellow. Maybe I'll step that up a little bit as well. We'll just kind of play with some colors here. Okay, so we've got our text 1, 2 and 3 colors. So text 2 will change to a nice yellow. So you can see we've got some real nice level of control over different parts of this image here as well. And then also control over things like the filter opacity, so we can kind of tint that differently. So we're going back to the original color of the image, or having that tint color there as well. So again, a nice kind of level of control that helps us to decide where we want our image to be. And we've got some roundness of the box as well, so we can round off our edges for our box here, and then some options for the box width and box height, depending on the size of your text in the middle there. Now with some things, if we've got our text in here, we may find at some point that we need to come into our type options to work on things like the line spacing. And again, this is another Instagram story that really relies on the font. So you may notice when you first load up the Ultimate Story Pack, if you don't have the fonts in there, it will look kind of a bit dry with the default Helvetica or sans serif fonts in there. But once you've got the fonts installed, so this Rustico font, then we really start to get that kind of nice look for these different stories. So that's a brief overview of setting up our Instagram stories in Final Cut Pro 10. And there's one thing to kind of cover here after that, and that is how to export these out to Instagram. So if we pause this, we're going to come to share here up at the top. Now, before we do this, you may want to export out all of these in one go, or get Instagram to actually split them up, or actually export them out one at a time so that you can upload them separately to Instagram. So actually, if we come to one of these clips and just tap X, that's now marked out that clip. That means when we get this range selection, so rather than the regular selection when we don't see the handles at either edge, when we press X, we actually get a range selection. So when we export this, it's actually only going to export out that 15 seconds of video as its own particular story. So if we click on the share button here, we'll come to master file, and we'll go to settings, and here I want to export out as an MPEG-4 file for uploading to Instagram. I found for most things, exporting out in the computer format is the best way of doing it, and you just need to make sure that you set it to better quality, and also set the resolution up to 1080 by 1920 so you get that high quality resolution. We can see that this is actually only 15 seconds, so it's just that range of the third story that's been selected that we're exporting. So we'll press next, and we'll call this Ultimate Story Pack Demo Surf Export. And this should be a very quick export from Final Cut Pro on most computers. So once we see that this is finished exporting, and we're going to come to the desktop, and we're going to open up a new Finder window here. So File, New Finder Window, and we are going to go to AirDrop. And once we're in AirDrop, we should see my iPhone pop up here. So we can drop this to my iPhone, and we'll see the image has dropped in there right into my images. I can play it now on here, and I can also now come into Instagram. So I'm just going to come back to my home screen, back to Instagram, and we'll add a story. Come to my camera roll, and we should see it starts off with the black screen, so we should see that as the first story there. We'll see it play through as a preview. We can add any tags that we want to. If we have more than 10,000 followers, then we can add the scroll up feature there as well. Otherwise, we can just hit send to and share and hit done. So with that MPEG-4 file, that's how we would export out our file so that we can get it up onto Instagram. We can see that playing through now. It's posted. So that is all the steps for how to set up a project in Final Cut Pro 10 for Instagram, for an Instagram story, the right resolution, how to set things up in the Ultimate Story Pack, some of the Ultimate Story Pack pre-made templates, and then also how to kind of modify some of the image content there and export out. I hope that's been useful, and there's a few good details in there, I think, for those that aren't using the Ultimate Story Pack. So thanks for watching. Please do leave your comments and feedback below. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.